So let's talk about the science of effective feedback. There's actually neuroscience studies that have been conducted. The neuroscience of criticism versus constructive guidance. It reveals that a fundamental brain difference is actually in place, right? Criticism triggers the brain's threat response to a system, right? That activates the amygdala and releases stress hormones that inhabit learning and creative thinking, while constructive guidance that focuses on growth opportunities activates the reward circuits, right? So we've gone from the response system. When you're receiving feedback, it activates the amygdala, immediately releases the stress hormones, right? It's a threat system. It's hey, there's feedback coming at me. Someone's coming at me. And so it's an immediate negative reaction. And that releases dopamine eventually that enhances cognitive function. And so what we want to do is we want to focus on growth and guidance, not down. So we're working on building up and not tearing down, because you're immediately going to get two different types of interaction as soon as you do that. What the neuroscience shows us about this criticism, right, is that we come and if we come to the client and we say, this isn't working, then their immediate guard goes up and they're immediately stress hormones involved, and it's an all defense. But if you come to them and say, you know what, I feel like this could work better if, right, then it goes up and not down, thus releasing dopamine, and it enhances their cognitive function and their reception to new ideas. Also, timing. Timing is everything on feedback, right? We don't want to let it linger too long, but we don't want it to be so immediate that it's off the cuff. So immediate off the cuff is usually what I struggle with. That's where I need to kind of stop, collect my thoughts thoroughly, and put together a more rational, well thought out critique or feedback, right? Whereas other people may take so long to put that together that the other party involved assumes everything is great. And so there's got to be a good balance there of knowing. I always recommend at least 12 to 24 hours on some of these things. It's just kind of the sleep on it rule, right? And then you also, when you're giving this feedback, the ratio used to be, we used to call it the Oreo feedback, right? Where you would say, you'd give a compliment or something positive, you'd put the negative in the middle, and then you would conclude it with something positive as well. It was kind of a 2-to-1 right to wrong ratio. Hey, this is right, this part is wrong, but again, this part is right as well. So, now in society, psychologists have told us that, and sociologists have told us that the right ratio now is actually 3 positives to 1 negative. So think about that. Every time you give one piece of negative feedback, you're going to have it equal in that moment, not later, in that moment, 3 pieces of positive feedback as well in order for them to properly receive it. Think about that next time you're engaging in feedback with your client. All right, so we talked about why feedback is important and the psychology behind it. Now let's talk about how do we actually structure effective feedback processes. Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it all goes back to that briefing. It's expectation management from the very beginning. When you have that creative briefing, say, this is how it's going to go, this is how we're going to do feedback, and this is how we're going to understand when the project is actually done and we're done with revisions, which we're going to talk more about here in a second. Also, creating feedback guidelines for the client in that briefing, right? Again, we're saying, here's how we're going to do feedback. Here's how we're going to move forward. Here's what the round of revisions are going to look like. Here's what the timeline is going to look like. You set up all that stuff in the beginning. It's a lot less conflict feeling there towards the end when you're having to make final revisions to get it done. And speaking of revisions, you also want to establish those revision limits from the get-go in writing in the contract. How many rounds of revisions are you willing to give at this price, and be very clear and upfront about that, not just in writing, but verbally during the briefing as well. So let's talk about this feedback funnel method, right? It's a strategic versus tactical feedback, right? We're separating the big picture from the details. That's kind of the first thing you need to understand, is the feedback funnel is going to separate the big picture from the details. And the feedback funnel is 3 stages. Number 1, it's in the concept, right? Feedback in the concept will save you from struggles later on throughout the project. So understanding what it is that we're setting out to do to begin with, it's painting done, it's getting that good project brief, that's going to create the most effective feedback for you.